Oye. This video is designed to go along with our A series in QR1. Now, we've got a second video. Hopefully you've taken a look at it because we're going to pick up with some of it here. As you can see, we've already got our windows laid out in one of our scenarios from the A series. If you haven't checked that out, check out our other video on the STK lessons to go along with the A series. This video is about the Sheets lessons or Spreadsheets lessons to go along with this. Now, we're going to have a variety of these, and to cut down on some of the time and redundancy on it, I will show you for the most part, all of this being done through Google Sheets. Now, we introduced kind of ways to streamline what we were doing, but I made reference to checking out this video, hopefully you are, so that you can get some of the power of spreadsheets. Now, you're welcome to use Excel. One of the reasons why we've actually preferred with myself and my cadets to use Sheets is that's something that's broadly available. You can basically access it and it's internet-based. Now, the downside is it's internet-based, but the upside is it doesn't matter if you're on a Mac or on a Chromebook or on a regular PC desktop, you're able to access Google Sheets, and it's very, very similar to Excel. You also don't have to pay for it, at least in the usual ways that we pay for stuff. So, as a result, that's why we prefer that. I've gone to the Google Sheets page, and I am actually logged in to Chrome with my particular profile here so that it'll hold on to all of my files for me. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go to Sheets. Okay, so I've got kind of a blank set here. It's got some recommendations, and as you have more and more files, you'll see some of them recommended in here, but you can always go through and track those. Best thing to do is to go to the plus here to make a blank. Okay, now this is the same thing that I recommend for my students. That's telling me some stuff. I gotta go away. Okay, the first thing you should do when you open up a new document, and this also goes for Excel, although you would have to go to File, Save As, and all of that. It comes up as Untitled Spreadsheet or My Sheet or something like that. Give your sheet a useful name. So I'm going to call this ISAT 1A1. Okay. But that way, I know that this is for our trainings, our tutorials, and that this is for the QR1 series, the A series, and specifically scenario number 1. When I look at the other two, I might make a file that says ISAT 1A2 or ISAT 1A3. We'll come back to that soon enough. Little bit of a rundown on the broad stuff for Sheets, and spreadsheets in general. I'm not going to dive too far into it. Either you'll get that from other videos, or you can do some additional research on your own. But some of the terminology, each of these little boxes is called a cell. They have an address. In the columns, they are kept track of by letter. So this is column A, this is column B, this is column C. And then in the rows, they're kept track of by numbers, 1, 2, 3. So if I click on this cell, it has an address of, we can see it up here, B2. B is the column, 2 as the row. And that's how we can actually denote it. Now, that's going to come in much more useful later when we start doing some math. We'll do a little bit of math on this as we go through. But the big thing that I want to emphasize on this is how we can use this to organize your information. Now, in the other video, we showed that you could go through and by organizing your windows, you could do the following. We can set up controlling our orbital parameters here in the ISAT properties and the orbits. And then we also brought up our important, for this scenario, access report that tells us the contact times and all of that between the satellite and our target location. I've got it restored back to the default stuff. So this is when you just open the scenario, we're looking at a score of about 34 points. Okay, here's where we could start going through and making some changes. Now going through, first thing that I would probably want to do is go ahead and write this one down. Now, one thing that I'm going to recommend to save a little bit of time, you can do minimize here, and you can go back down here and try and bring things back up. But if these are the only two things that you're using, at least on a desktop PC, which is probably what you're using with STK anyway, or if you've got one person working on the STK computer and you've got another person working on, say, a Chromebook, you wouldn't necessarily even have to do this. But as a heads up, hold down Alt and hit Tab once. That will actually have you flash back and forth between the last window that you had up. It becomes a quick way of doing this. Here's what I'm going to do. We want to keep track of all of our trials. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put in a title at the top. You do not have to do this, but from the very beginning, I want to try and get you all in the habit of ways that will make this more approachable to others. Odds are good you're not working these scenarios on your own, or at least when you get to competition, you won't be. Take the extra time to make it easy for other people to understand. On top of that, you're going through and getting skills that will carry over to the workplace. I'm going to do trial 1, 2, 3, that sort of thing. We'll come back to that in just a moment. I'll show you more on that. But the key things that I want to keep track of are my apogee. I'm going to call that apo. My perigee. I'm going to call that para. My inclination. I'm going to call that inc. My, I believe, argument of perigee is next. Yep, argument of perigee. I'm going to call that AOP. And then ran and true anomaly. Ran and true anomaly. Now, these are abbreviations. They're the ones that I and my cadets end up using. You're welcome to come up with your own, or they're usually in that order. You're welcome to set up however you would like. But here's what I'm going to recommend. Start off, my apogee started off at 600 kilometers. My perigee was at 600 kilometers. My inclination was at 28.5. I'm able to move from one cell to the right by hitting the tab button. It's a pretty quick way of doing it. Argument of perigee is 0. We've got zeros for all the others. Last thing I'm going to do, and you could do it in the next column over, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to skip a space, and I'm actually going to put total time, and I'm going to mark that it's in hours. Now, I like to put a little bit of a space there because it then draws the eye, and you know that one of these is different than the others. If you want to give a hard delineation, then I can squeeze this in by grabbing up here where it's the double arrow, left click and drag it over a little bit. And then I can also fill in all of this with maybe, I don't know, a gray bar. Okay, maybe something a little bit easier on the eyes, but what I really want is this. Time is 16.907. Now, I use a number pad on a full keyboard. It's one that I've taken a lot of time to get used to. So if you're wondering, hopefully I appear to be typing numbers quickly. It's a skill that I've built over time. It might take you a little while to get used to doing that. But there are also some copy-paste things, but I'm going to leave that to you all. One last thing that I'm going to show you as we set some of this up is score. Here's where we can do a little bit of math. I'm going to, for the spreadsheet to do math, I need to hit the equals sign as my very first action. So now it's got equals. And I know that for every hour I get 2 points, so I'm going to take 2 times, and the times is the little star button, that's Shift 8, I believe, on a Chromebook, that sort of thing. And then I'm going to click on the time. Not type in 16.907. I'm going to click on that cell I2 that I have there. And then I hit enter. It's doubled it for me where we have 33.814 points. That's my actual score. I estimated that to be about 34 earlier because I wasn't doing the actual math. Okay, that's hopefully going to be useful, but watch as we go forward. Here's what I'm going to do. Let's do a second trial. I'm going to come down here. And the key to this is go through and only change one thing at a time, unless you have a strong reason otherwise. So I'm going to try and bump up our apogee altitude, but I'm going to leave my perigee altitude at 600. Now back down here, I mentioned this in our STK video. Go check that out if you haven't. But now that I've updated it and our orbit changed, I can click the refresh button. Now that I've done that, I now have 19.228. 19.228. Now, there are a couple things to note on this. One, oh, sorry, I forgot my very own actual rule. Bad. So, I have made a change. 1,000 kilometers. I should have started off with this. I'm going to change this to 1,000 kilometers. And you can either do one of two things. You could either click up here and drag down, and it'll do kind of the same stuff across the board. So what I can do is, holding down Shift, I can drag across all of these and grab the little blue circle and drag it down. In Excel, it's actually a little square, but it does the same thing. And it will basically say, okay, that's a number, I'm just going to bring that down. But that's something that takes a lot of time and effort. What I actually recommend for my students is leave them blank. Only put in a new number if you change it. So then you might have on the next one, let's go ahead and set that up, 1,000. Oh, Actually, I'm not going to change that. Let's change our orbital inclination to 32.5. Let's make that the only thing that I change. It's still at 1,000, but I'm going to go with 32.5 for my orbital inclination. Click Apply, click Refresh, and now I'm at 20.668. Oops. Great. This becomes a quick way that you can go through and start keeping track of literally everything that you try. Because you want to try and be able to move through these quickly, but you also want to make certain that, hey, maybe you find one that gets you 90 points and you're like, I think we can do better, and you start doing something else and it goes down to 87, and then half an hour's gone by and you go, wait, which one had the highest? Now this is a way that you can easily keep track of all the stuff that you've got. My good cadets on this could go through a scenario like this and within 30 minutes have well over, I think, almost 200 different attempts at the solution on this. A little bit more that I want to show you on this. I've got a score here. I've taught it the equation. I have 2 times whatever is in row I. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come back up here. Now that I've taught it the math, I'm going to grab that little circle and I'm going to drag it down. In fact, I'm going to drag it down pretty far. It is taking 2 times. Hey, look, it followed me down. And then here, 2 times I4. It's actually following me down. So now as I fill things in, let's say that I find one with 52 hours. Well, I'd have a score of 104. But now as I fill this in, it will automatically tell me what my score is. And later, when it comes time for me to turn in my solution, I can go down the score column and just find the one that is the biggest value. And then I'll actually have that information hopefully pretty easy. All right, so one of the last things that we want to take a look at with this is, other than doing our organization and basic math, you don't have to do any of these in the way that we've got, but let's say that you end up with, oh, and I forgot to show you this. I was typing in 1, 2, 3, 4, but that's kind of a pain. This little circle basically says drag down and fill in whatever's there. Well, I don't want 4 for everything, but there's a trick. Hold down the control button. Sorry, the shift button, I think. Nope, it's the control button. I'm having problems with my transition from this to Excel. I think both of them have control, but in Excel it puts a little plus sign next to it. If you hold down control and drag down, it'll actually add 1 to whatever the previous thing was. So instead of having to type these in, I could now go all the way down to, I don't know, 158. Hey, 157. Because my first cell is not actually a number. But this becomes an easy way to actually put numbers in or fill them in. If you don't hold down control, it just drags down whatever's there. That can be a way that you could fill this whole thing in. But kind of the nice thing is, if you stop and imagine it, if this whole thing, this whole section here were completely filled in with numbers, it might be kind of hard on the eye to see what you have changed. If you have a bunch of empty spots, and the empty spots by default for everyone mean, hey, it's just the number, scroll up until you run into a number, and it's that number. Now you have an easy way of seeing what things you've changed at any individual step. Now, one of the last things that I want to show you for organization on this is going to be a way that, hey, if you did end up with 200, oh, wait, which one of these columns was my inclination? I wanted to change my inclination. Do I have to scroll all the way up? That can be a pain. So we can come up here to View and go down to Freeze, and we can go to 1 row. Now there's a double thick line there, but that's telling you that it actually froze that top row. Now, as I scroll down, I can go all the way down to the, here's my 73rd try, but I can see my titles, trial, apogee, perigee, inclination, all of those are still there. It's just a way of making things a little bit cleaner. You can also freeze the top row, you can freeze the first column. You've got plenty of good options on there depending on what things you want to be able to see as you scroll down. Though, you can't just freeze anything, so you might have to get a little creative with it. These are some of the overview things that we wanted to get you set up for so that you're able to go through and really be able to efficiently approach these problems. Some of the last things that I'll recommend on this are you can move the file. Click Move, and you can create folders, do all sorts of stuff with it. I'm not going to go into detail on that, but something for you to look into. if hopefully this is the first of many sheets that you'll actually be making, and it helps to actually keep track of those and keep them organized. I heavily recommend that you go through and you give it a good title so that when you end up with more files, you'll be able to easily find what you're looking for. One last thing that I'm going to put in, and I'm going to mention this because it's one that I think is actually pretty important. On the score, I have it doing some math. If I were to pass this new file off to any of my cadets, they'd be able to look at it and have a pretty good idea from our agreed upon, oh, that's our apogee, that's our perigee, and so forth. I might put in a note in here that said, hey, any empty spot is just whatever the last number was in that column. But since that's not something that or that's something that we kind of train our cadets for, I think that's more or less fine. But back over here where I did score, this is a great example for it. Right-click on it and comment. This is a very important thing for you to do, especially if you want to build towards being able to share these documents with others and work on a team. If you're going to be doing the competitive side of this, it's very important that everyone on your team be able to quickly and easily understand what's going on. And if you want to work in this in industry, you definitely want to make certain that you're explaining with enough detail that another person could come in and pick up where you left off. I'm doing something special with the score here, so I'm going to add a comment. We get 2 points for every hour. So this column multiplies the I column, which is time in hours, multiplies by 2. Comment. Now, it's not in the way, but if someone hovers over it, they can see that I left a comment saying what I'm doing with that column and, most importantly, why mathematically I'm doing it. It's not a huge deal, but as you start getting to very complex stuff, or if you want to add your own twist on things, or give something, sometimes a silly name maybe, it's helpful to have a comment that someone can hover over so that they get a better idea of exactly what's in that column, how to get it, and why you're doing it. Although, base that how you would like. All right, hopefully this lesson has been very useful for you.